Starting NoFap is hard, but starting NoFap again is even harder. This is a lesson that I've learned the hard way throughout my NoFap journey. Now, if you haven't been following my NoFap journey up to this point, let me give you a brief recap as to how I reached this point where I'm making this video right here. I started NoFap back in 2020, March 31st, 2020 to be exact. My first streak lasted all of a few hours. The next streak lasted 2 weeks, and then the next streak lasted 9 months. I quit NoFap at that point, and I did make a video on that if you want to see my line of reasoning as to why I quit at the time. And I proceeded to do the deed to indulge in PMO, well, not PMO, but MO, for the next few months. And after a few months of doing that, I realized that it was just making me feel worse in pretty much every conceivable aspect in life. So I decided to get back on NoFap, and from there on in, I ended up going around 13 months of NoFap. 13 straight months with no relapses whatsoever. And during that time, I developed a lot of confidence and a lot of momentum as far as breaking not just that addiction, but any and all addictions in my life. I was able to really take control of my life and change my life and myself in a way that was magical, to say the least. And if you followed my journey throughout that time from around March or April of 2021 through around maybe May or June of 2022, you know what I'm talking about. Now, for whatever reason, I ended up relapsing, to make a long story short. And from there on in, I was off the wagon. Since then, since that relapse, actually, as a matter of fact, I think I went maybe a couple of more months after that relapse, and then I really fell off the wagon around maybe July or August of 2022. Since then, I have not gone more than maybe 10 or 11 days of NoFap, not including the times where I was physically with my girlfriend, who is, by the way, my long distance girlfriend, not including the times where I was with her. I have not gone more than 10 or 11 days on NoFap. It's time to address this, right? And I'm not just telling you guys this just so that you can get all in my personal business. I'm telling you this because I believe that I found the reason why I have struggled to get back on NoFap. I've gotten a lot of emails recently, which, by the way, I am answering emails again. So if you emailed me a long time ago and I didn't get back to you, go ahead and check now. Guarantee you that I got back to you. But anyways, I've been getting quite a few emails recently of people who are struggling to match streaks that they've gone on in the past. And I believe that there's a reason for this. But first, we need to address why we fall off of the wagon in the first place. You don't just fall off of the wagon because you feel like it. There's usually some sort of external factor that doesn't necessarily force you to fall off the wagon, but encourages you to fall off of the wagon in a sense. And what I found when I do the self-inventory and reflect on my journey is that the times where I relapsed, especially after long streaks, were generally the more stressful times in my life. You see, the time when I fell off the wagon, officially, around July or August of 2022, that was around the time that I realized that the life that I had built was falling apart and there really wasn't anything I could do about it because the way I had built it was simply unsustainable. That created a lot of stress and a lot of tension within me. And my means of releasing that tension was PMO. And that created a spiral where the stress caused me to relapse, which brought about more stress, which brought about more relapses. And that's the cycle that I've essentially been in from July or August of 2022 through now. That being said, that's the first thing that we need to address. Stress. You have to start minimizing your stress if you want to do NoFap. NoFap is going to expose the tension that is already within you. Let me repeat that. It's going to expose the tension that is already within you. The chances are you've been ignoring it or distracting yourself from it by indulging in PMO and or other addictions or other instant gratification based activities. When you do NoFap and when you relinquish your instant gratification based activities, this tension comes to the surface. From there, you have to figure out how you can go about releasing that tension in a healthy and sustainable way, and ideally even a productive way, a way that will help you transform yourself. And in my experience, one of the most healthy and sustainable ways to go about relieving stress is through therapy. And that brings me to BetterHelp, the sponsor of today's video. BetterHelp's mission is to make therapy more affordable and more accessible. And this is an important mission because finding a therapist can be really hard, especially when you're limited to the options in your area. BetterHelp is a platform that makes finding a therapist easier because it's online, it's remote, and by filling out just a few questions, BetterHelp can match you with a professional therapist in as little as a few days. It's easy to sign up and get matched with a therapist. There's a link in my description. It's betterhelp.com/JordanGreen. Clicking that link helps support this channel, but it also gets you 10% off your first month of BetterHelp so that you can connect with a therapist and see if it helps you. And because finding a therapist is a little like dating, if you don't really fit with that therapist, which is a common thing in therapy, you can easily switch to a therapist for free without stressing about insurance, who's in your network, or anything like that. So if you're struggling, consider online therapy with BetterHelp. Click the link in the description or visit betterhelp.com/JordanGreen. Now, if you really want to get the most out of therapy and NoFap, or really any other practice that's rooted in your continued growth and expansion as a soul and as a human, you need to be present. You have to be present enough to let go of the stresses of the future. You see, when you're present, when you allow yourself to fully immerse yourself in the bliss of the present moment and the infinite expanse of the present moment, what you'll find is that a lot of the things that you stress about, probably 90 to 95% of the things that you stress about, are not actually real. Now, the feelings may be very real, the situations may be very real, but the reality is simply not real. In the sense that you might be stressing about financial issues, for example, that don't actually exist. You're projecting. You're thinking about the financial issues that you might have 12 months from now. But 12 months from now, you'll still be in the present moment. You'll just be viewing a different image through the same framework of the present moment. So when you get there, you're still going to be here. What about your life right now makes you believe that you will not be financially secure 12 months from now? You can only fix that problem right here, right now. So you have to be present to leverage the moment in order to build a better you and, by extension, a better future. Now, how do you go about leveraging the present moment to build a better you and build a better future? The answer is simple. You make one decision at a time. You see, the key to NoFap is you have to break it down decision by decision. Your life is literally a culmination of your decisions. So you have to be completely conscious in the present moment to take control of the wheel and decide which direction you're going to go in life. And it's not so much about the big decisions. Obviously, those are important. But once you make those big decisions about doing something like NoFap or getting in the gym or building a business, then you have to make a series of small decisions on a moment-to-moment basis, which perpetuate and reinforce the big decisions. If you want to do NoFap, if that's your big decision, you have to make small decisions which support that. So for example, maybe instead of scrolling through social media where you know that you might see provocative images, which will ultimately lead to a relapse down the line, you might read a book, or you might watch one of my videos, or you might do something which will help you to stay in the mindset of somebody who's on NoFap. You have to break your life down one decision at a time. This is something that I didn't understand. This is something that I did not understand because there were various points throughout the past 13 months or so, or since I relapsed, since I fell off the wagon, where I thought that I could simply decide to go 13 months again. I've done it before, so I can do it again. And while that is technically true, while it's true that anybody could technically do it, I also failed to acknowledge that I went the first 18 or 19 years of my life doing NoFap, And then suddenly I was addicted to it. So just because you've done NoFap in the past doesn't mean that you can do it in the same way right now. And a lot of times it can make it more difficult because you think that you can do it mentally, but physically or psychologically, you find that it's simply not possible for you. And the reason why is because you're so focused on your past successes that you're not conscious in the present moment. And thus you make bad decisions which lead to relapses. This is true in pretty much any aspect of life. This includes dieting, working out, this includes building a brand, or really anything else in between. You have to be present, conscious, and aware if you want to leverage the present moment. You have to understand that it's not so much about relinquishing the future and indulging in instant gratification. That's not what being present actually means. Being present is about utilizing this present moment to build a better future. You can't experience a better future until you've built it. And it can only be built in the present moment, and it can also only be experienced in the present moment. Because again, even when you get to the future, you'll still be in the present moment. Now, I've talked a lot about the future and the present, but let's talk about the past. Let's talk about guilt. The guilt that you feel from doing PMO, from relapsing. Before you can clear yourself and forgive yourself of all of that guilt and shame, you have to understand where it's coming from. I talked a lot about self-forgiveness in the past, but something that I failed to expound upon was figuring out what you're forgiving in the first place. You see, a lot of people have the misconception that your guilt is rooted in you releasing your seed. That's not inherently bad. There's nothing inherently bad about releasing your seed because, for one, your body will replenish it. Usually within the week, it'll replenish it. But also, it's natural, right? If nobody released their seed, we would be extinct as a species. So there's nothing inherently wrong. There's nothing fundamentally wrong with releasing your seed. The guilt comes from you going against your commitment, you going against your discipline, you lying to yourself. Now, once you've established the source of the guilt, now it's time to not necessarily clear the guilt, but convert the guilt, alchemize the guilt into humility. You see, one mistake that I made in my NoFap journey many times before was I would say things like, it's impossible for me to relapse. I can never relapse. I'm at a point now where NoFap is automatic for me. And while it was true that I had built up a lot of momentum and I was very confident in my ability to abstain from PMO, I learned a very valuable lesson, not just about NoFap, but about life in general, which is that if you take your foot off the gas, don't be surprised when the car comes to a stop. Okay, if you're driving 100 miles per hour and you take your foot off the gas, the car is going to continue to move for a little while. It's going to coast. But eventually, it will come to a stop because there's no more force being applied to it. In the same way, if you're on NoFap and you develop the mindset or the mentality that you're good and that you'll never relapse again, your fate has pretty much been sealed. Once you develop that mentality, your fate has been sealed because you're no longer conscious and aware in the present moment. The level of presence that you need in not just NoFap, but in life is what I call parking lot presence. If you've ever driven a car and parked a car in particular in a crowded parking lot at that, then you know the level of awareness that you have when you're driving through the parking lot looking for spaces all around you. You're completely present in the moment. You're not worried about a mile down the road. You're focused on what's right there in front of you. That's the level of presence and awareness that you need. That's the level of diligence that you need in terms of your discipline in making conscious decisions. You have to be disciplined and conscious and aware because the moment that you start coasting, you're already slowing down and eventually you'll come to a stop. And that might be your streak. That might be the financial abundance that's flowing your way, unless you've built systems to bring that to you passively. That might be your relationship. You're no longer putting an effort in your relationship and suddenly your partner becomes cold. Everything in life that is meaningful will require your continued and sustained effort and consciousness. The key is investing your consciousness into things that actually matter to you. And if you're watching this video, then clearly NoFap matters to you. So you have to take that guilt and turn it into humility. And you do that by removing the negative thought patterns behind the guilt. You essentially replace the negative self-talk with positive self-talk. And the way that you do that is by finding the other side of the coin. So for example, if you're feeling like you're guilty that you went back on your word, then the reason why is because you know that you are a man of your word. And so that's something that you need to praise yourself for, being a man of your word. When you praise the positive, you automatically negate the negative. And from there, you're left with the shell of the guilt, which is filled with positivity. And from there, the guilt becomes humility. Now you understand that you're not invincible and that you have to stay aware and stay alert. But at the same time, you're doing it from a place of love and abundance, not from a place of scarcity and lack and feeling like you need to do NoFap in order to love yourself. No, you do NoFap because you love yourself.